Breaking tonight, new developments after our exclusive interview with Governor Jeb Bush, as some in the political media pounce on what Governor Bush now says was a misinterpretation and declares his candidacy, the media, some, dead in the water. Really? Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. This past Saturday, Governor Jeb Bush gave his first national television interview in several months, sitting down with yours truly to face a series of tough questions on a handful of key issues. While we covered a lot of political ground, the moment getting all the attention was a response to a question that he says tonight he misinterpreted. Knowing what we know now, would you have authorized the invasion?
I would have, and so would have Hillary Clinton, just to remind everybody, and so would have almost everybody that was confronted with the intelligence they got.
You don't think it was a mistake?
In retrospect, the intelligence that everybody saw, that the world saw, not just the United States, was faulty. And in retrospect, once we invaded and took out Saddam Hussein, we didn't focus on security first. And the Iraqis, in this incredibly insecure environment, turned on the United States military because there was no security for themselves and their families. By the way, guess who thinks that those mistakes took place as well? George W. Bush.
Today, the governor appeared on Sean Hannity's radio show to explain what happened in that exchange.
I was talking about, given what people knew then, would you have done it, rather than knowing what we know now. And knowing what we know now, you know, clearly there were mistakes as it related to faulty intelligence in the lead up to the war and the lack of focus on security. My brothers admitted this, and we have to learn from that.
So is the onslaught against Governor Bush over this one question fair? Britt Hume is our Fox News senior political analyst. He joins me now. Britt, is it?
Well, look, he clearly misunderstood your question, although the question was quite straightforwardly posed, Megyn. I mean, there was nothing about the question that should have triggered the answer. But I must say, the first time I heard the exchange, I didn't quite catch that he'd blown it. The answer he gave, though, once you listen to it, is clearly and unmistakably an answer to a question about what you would have done had you not known what we know now. In other words, had you only known what we knew then. So that was blindingly obvious, I think, to any fair-minded observer, and he's gotten criticized by a lot of people who are not really making attempts to be fair-minded observers.
I think, you know, my own feeling on it is he was ready to make news on Iraq, because he hasn't said that much on Iraq thus far. He was ready to finally say how he feels about it, that mistakes were made, and take a position. And he heard Iraq.
Right.
And this is a candidate's cue to say what you're going to say.
Right.
And he had sort of didn't hear or rejected that part of the question, and it got him in some trouble. Right.
He had a talking point ready. He knew and had to have known for the longest time that when he sat down for an interview, a searching interview like the one you did, that there were going to be questions about Iraq, and he had this answer ready. And, you know, the answer was obviously carefully thought through because, of course, it ended up dovetailing with what he said his brother now thinks. So he was able to answer a question on Iraq, admit there were mistakes, say his brother agrees with him, and tie the whole thing up in a nice little bundle. And he just didn't get the question he needed for that answer, and the result is what you saw. Now, you got to have to add this. I think people have been unfair in their criticism, but once that happened, he or someone close to him should have said, Governor, you misunderstood that question and you need to straighten that out. Now, it may have been after the interview was over, but by, you know, later the same day or the first thing in the morning, I guess yesterday morning, he should have been out with a clarification that he did not make until Sean's radio show this afternoon. That let that thing lie out there and through a 2 or 3 news cycles, depending on how you time it, and become a problem for
You
it.
have to assume they didn't anticipate that people were going to jump to the conclusion that they've jumped. I mean, the headlines today, just to show our viewers, this is where some have gone with this. Look at this this is from MSNBC. Is Jeb Bush's position on Iraq a disqualifier? And then Politico comes out and asks, will this take down? Will Iraq take down another Bush? I mean, they may have been a bit surprised by not just that blowback from some on the right, but criticism, you know, from many on the left, but criticism on the right too, as well.
But Megyn, if your name is Bush and you're running for president, you got to be careful about Iraq. And I think he thought he had been. Obviously, as we've just discussed, he had something to say that I think he thought would cover the base. But he didn't get the question that occasioned that, and he should have moved quickly he or his team should have moved quickly to clean it up, as they now have done.
Well, let's
now,
talk
how
about
long this will last is anybody's guess.
Well, let's talk about the blowback that he's received from some on the right. So Byron York wrote an unforgiving piece talking about how this was a disastrous defense of the Iraq War. And Laura Ingraham, who is not a Jeb Bush fan, it must be said, she disagrees strongly with his position on immigration, came out and said this.
No, Hillary wouldn't. Hillary wouldn't authorize the war now if she knew what she knew now then. No, of course not. But look, that's just a fun hypothetical, but you have to say no to that. You can't say, yes, I still would have gone into Iraq. And if you do, you just have to have, there has to be something wrong with you.
What did you make of it? I mean, to me, that just...
Well,
go ahead.
I thought it was pretty obvious from the way he answered the question that he was answering the wrong question and misunderstood the premise of it. And, Laura's a smart lady. I would have thought she would have come to the same conclusion, but she did the same thing that Byron did. They both just took the answer at face value.
But doesn't that show you...
It's not entirely unfair to do that, but, I think in this case it was, perhaps not reasonable.
But doesn't that show you the depths of the dislike for Governor Bush by a wing of the Republican Party? This is one of the challenges he faces.
Oh, yes. Well, I would say that the major challenge he faces, trying to get nominated in today's Republican Party, is making peace with its right wing. And he's got a couple of big issues. You just mentioned immigration being one of them, Common Core educational standards being another, which he's not backing away from, which you might say is to his credit, but it didn't do him any good with the people on the right. Now, I should add, by the way, that on Common Core in particular, the ignorance among a lot of people in this country about what Common Core actually is breathtaking. But that's also part of the hill he's got to climb. If he's going to explain Common Core and get people to go along with him or at least accept him, he's got to go out and make the case on that and overcome a lot of misapprehensions about what those educational standards really are and what they mean.
Having seen the whole interview now, I mean, putting the Iraq issue to the side, he made a lot of news. And just observing him in that context for so long, I thought was interesting from a political and a journalistic standpoint.
Oh, I agree with you entirely, Laura. It was a pretty effective interview, but it highlighted strengths and weaknesses. Much as that speech he made down there where you saw him did. That was a very interesting and compelling case for Christianity that he made and for religious freedom as well, but it wasn't made in stem-winding fashion. And the 34,000-strong Christian audience didn't rise to his feet as one and cheer him for making it. But when you read it, I mean, I thought it read better than it sounded. Mm-hmm. And the answers he gave you were thoughtful, well-informed. It shows you that he's an intellect of some standing, and he's reasonable, impressive. But, it's often said that the worst thing you can say about a politician is that he's good in small groups. It's like, you end up being kind of a political wallflower if you can't stir a crowd. And I think that's a further challenge for him.
We will continue to watch, and there's much more coming up. Britt, always great to speak with you.
Thanks, Megan.
Well, one of the men who has to get past Jeb Bush is here right after this break. And in moments, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas will weigh in on Governor Bush and our interview and his own positions on some of these matters. And President Obama taking time out today for one of his favorite topics, Fox News. James Rosen is here on what we're being blamed for now. It's probably all James's fault, so it's good he's here. Plus, we'll show you why students at a Catholic college have decided they do not want Cardinal Timothy Dolan speaking at their graduation.